All right. Good noon and afternoon to everybody who is currently joined in for UMISA's iWeek cultural podcast. Today we have Hanif, Rosita, and Marcelo who are from Indonesia, and they'll be talking to us about the geography, the ethnic makeup, the culture, and basically everything socio-geographic about Indonesia. And we'll also be giving us a brief insight into the ancient temple of Prambanan. So, welcome Hanif, Rosita, and Marcelo to our podcast.
Hello, it's
Hi
nice.
everyone. Hello.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get started. Okay, can one of you guys, whoever wants to jump in, can jump at any time. Give us a brief sort of background overview about Indonesia. Where is it located, and what size is it? Basically, the basics, so that we get off.
Well, okay. Hi, my name is Rosita. So, Indonesia, I think a lot of you know, oh, we're really close by to Malaysia. We're actually like the next door neighbors right here. Uh, it only takes about like 1 or 2 hour flight from Kuala Lumpur to Jakarta, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so since it's not far off from Malaysia, I think it also can. It's not quite different in terms of Malaysia, but basically Indonesia is located between two continents, one being Asia and also Australia, since it's located like right between the two giant islands, the two continents, and then it's also where the Indian Ocean meets the Pacific Ocean. So we're like kind of trapped in between these different geographical things, and it also borders with three countries. So East Timor is actually bordered with one of our islands, and then Papua New Guinea, which is bordered with uh, Papua, and also Malaysia. We border Malaysia on Borneo, on or we call it Kalimantan, and it borders with I think uh, it's the only island that has three nations on it, which is Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei. One of the biggest triple split island. And then, Han, if you want to talk about how many provinces there are.
There are 34, right?
Yeah, I
There are
think so.
30.
It's 34. Yeah.
Yeah, it used to 33, but in 2000 something they add one more province, so it becomes 34.
Hmm. And
Uh, and they have five special administrative provinces, which is DKI Jakarta. DKI Jakarta is actually Jakarta, but actually the real name is DKI Jakarta, which DKI is what is it, Auni?
Daerah Ismail. I think it's in translated in English into like a special administrative state. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's somewhere. It's basically one of like the provinces there's given special, like if Indonesia is like governed a certain way, these special five provinces can have their own way of governing their state. And
Uh-huh.
I think Jakarta is because it's a capital, right?
It's
It's
also the
given
business
special,
city,
yeah.
something like that.
I see, yeah. And and then
There's
there's
also Aceh.
Aceh. Yeah, Aceh. I think a lot of you might have heard of Aceh.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So seems like it's a pretty big place, right? So
Mm.
can you give us a little bit info about the geography? Like you said that it borders the Pacific Ocean on one end and the Indian Ocean on the other end, and you're stuck between these large number of islands. But then could you give us like a general idea of maybe how many islands does Indonesia have in total, and any other sort of interesting geographic stuff? So I've heard that there's a lot of volcanoes and earthquake activity going on, so could you give us a brief something about that?
Okay, so like it's Indonesia is located on the Ring of Fire. If you guys don't know, it's like uh, what causes Indonesia to have like so many volcanoes stacked against each other, and It's also located between three uh, converging continental plates. Like it's basically with the Eurasian plate up to northeast, and then Pacific, and also the Australian. And because of that, that's what makes all of those what's called the volcanoes and like mountain ranges that are seen in Indonesia, though it's also a tropical country. And these volcanoes, there's up to 400 volcanoes that are like pretty much I think most of them are active, but the specific number I can't say. And then 150 active. Yeah, sorry, I'm just like looking at my notes right here. And uh, you, Hanif or Cello, you guys want to speak about like I think Indonesia's pretty well known. Do you know specific ones that made impact, like the big volcanoes and the
Siapa?
I just want to add that Indonesia is the world's largest archipelago, having around 17,000 islands.
Mm-hmm. And
Yeah, that's a very large number of islands for one country to have, I think.
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, about what Rosita just mentioned, the big super volcano. Anything about that that you can share with us?
It's actually, if I don't know if a lot of you will know, but it's one of there's five top volcanic eruptions like in the world, and two of them
Are from Indonesia.
are from Indonesia. Yeah, one of them is like Mount Tambora,
Yeah.
which erupted a long, long time ago, but it erupted around 1815 and killed 90,000 people at that time. So it reached quite far. And another one, I think, Marcelo or Hanif, you guys want to say the other one? I think this one is like much more well known.
This one is Krakatau. You guys know Krakatau? Do you know Krakatau, Sorum?
Yep. Yes, I've heard of
Yeah.
Krakatau. Yes.
I think there's a movie about it. Yeah, so it's
Mhm.
erupted on 83, and it's killing 35,000 people also, and the effects is felt even as far as North America, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. If I'm not mistaken.
Imagine the eruption from Indonesia reaching all the way to North America. So
Yeah.
it's that grand scale of like the volcanic eruption.
Yeah, I mean it's a pretty big and sort of geographically, happening place, I guess.
Yeah.
Enough, I think, about the geography and the soil. What population sizes do you have in Indonesia? So how are they distributed? What's the island populations like? And can you give us a brief background about the number of people living in Indonesia?
So, Cello, you want to speak about it?
Yes.
How many people?
So
Yeah.
it has around 270 million population.
Mm-hmm.
It's very full of diversity. We have numerous different ethnic groups, languages, and religions. And the largest are the Japanese, making up 40%, Sundanese 15%, and some other smaller ethnic groups make up to 38%. And 5% are non-indigenous, like Chinese, Arabs, Indians, and Europeans.
Yeah, the Javanese, I think a lot of Javanese you can see here in Malaysia as well. And since Indonesia and Malaysia are sort of like located in the center of, as we said, like the different continents, you might know like a long time ago, a lot of people like use this path to go from China to India, and that caused a lot of people to settle in. That's why we have a lot of like Chinese, Arabs, and Indians, also Europeans settled into Indonesia as well. So yeah, it's not as like race like you can see the different races here in Malaysia, but I think in Indonesia it's just like really more diverse. But yeah, and maybe
Yeah, okay.
yeah.
About this diversity of Indonesia, you mentioned that it used to be like the main sort of trade point that India and China they work with. So one of the questions that I've always had is about sort of Indonesia is a huge place, and it like spans almost from the edge of like the Malay Peninsula and all the way to Australia. So given that you have such large variation, I just wanted to know what portion of people live where. So like are they mostly centered on the big islands, or what's the distribution like where people actually live?
Mostly, I think people live on Java, of course, on Java Island.
Yeah, because Java have Jakarta, right? So it's a capital city where people work. So people from Sumatra, from Kalimantan or Borneo, from Sulawesi, they come to Jakarta for working. Yeah, I think that's the point
like,
why. Yeah.
Java, I think, is one of the most populated islands too in the world. It's just really dense, and all the other islands, even though we have that many islands, I think a lot of them are inhabited. So you don't really, not all of the places are used, and yeah, that's why if you go to Jakarta, that's where you'll mostly see the people
You know that Jakarta is what I can say, like the traffic is very horrible, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard the traffic in Jakarta. I've heard it pretty bad. So yeah,
Yeah.
given that you have this large population size, could you just give us a brief figure of numbers on the ethnic groups and the languages that are spoken in Indonesia?
I think Marcel like mentioned this earlier. Quite, it's the languages I think correspond with like the ethnicity groups. So we could say like the majority of like ethnic language that we use is Javanese, Sundanese, and there's also a lot of different. There's way too many to list, but uh, the most used language is still Indonesian because when you have that many ethnic groups, the only thing you could do is using another language to unify all of them. So you can't. Um, yeah, it's Javanese is probably the most prominent though, if we were to say.
Okay, so Bahasa Indonesia will act sort of as the lingua franca across all of these different multiple ethnic groups.
That's also the thing that make us so proud. Like over 17,000 islands, all of them still can speak Indonesian. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. And since you have that many ethnic groups, it's like Indonesian is a way to have all of them stay unified while not giving like leverage to like, oh, Javanese, since Javanese is more people in Indonesia that are Javanese, then we should use Javanese. No, we're trying to. The Indonesian language allows like all the languages to be together, and they all have to. They can all live together without having one ethnic group stronger than the other per se.
Yeah, so it forms a sort of the uniting, rope in a sense. So, about this staying in this region of culture and stuff, can you give us like a brief introduction to like what religious background of Indonesia is like? So, we understand that side of the story.
Marcelo, you wanna?
Okay, so Indonesia has 6 recognized religions. It's Islam, Protestant, Catholic, Hindu, Buddhist, and Confucianism. But apparently, the majority of Indonesians are Muslim, as we all know. But how Indonesia became prevalently Muslim is still being debated. But the biggest theory is from the influence of the Arab merchants that have arrived, as well as Indonesia's strategic location that connects India and China. So Indonesia is like the main gateway for merchants and visitors. That's where the religion started to spread.
Yep. So from those Arab merchants, you sort of have like a lot of them settling into Indonesia, and then that's how like the Islamic culture really took over the country.
Okay, so around what time would you say that Islam, started arriving in the, in
Maybe around 13th, 8th. They're still being debated because earlier, like we mentioned, like the difference in theories on how it started. It ranges from 8th century to 13th century. We learned this in history growing up, but it's really we're never given like a specific date.
If I'm not mistaken, the first religion in Indonesia is Hindu, right?
Yeah, Hindu and Buddhist.
Okay, so it could be a possible like around early 800s. You said is the earliest date that Islam could have arrived. So it sounds like that's pretty early for a place that's so far off from the place of origin, right?
That's why
of the Islamic religion.
Quite a debate.
Yeah. So coming to this aspect of historical religion and stuff. So could you give us like a brief overview of what like major historical sort of ages that Indonesia went through, and what are some of the interesting things maybe about these historical ages?
Okay, so from the beginning, I think Indonesia was like mainly a local Hindu and Buddhist like kingdom. So we had like the original indigenous people, and then it went from like local Hindu and Buddhist, and this is where like the giants like I think you've heard of Majapahit, and then it grew into Islamic kingdoms. from these Hinduists to grow into Islamic kingdoms that took over the country. And then I think Islamic kingdoms reigned for a long time, which then proceeded to continue until the colonization period, when a lot of Europeans started coming in, and a lot of the Europeans started to travel the world. And actually, one of the first people that came were the Portuguese. And Hanif, you want to continue? After the Portuguese, I think it was the Dutch. The Dutch reigned really long time. And
Yeah, okay. So would you say, like, how much would you say the European sort of colonization in this way has influenced the overall culture of Indonesia as we see it today?
Definitely a lot. The Indonesian language itself, what differentiates Indonesia and Malaysian language, the Bahasa Melayu and Bahasa Indonesia, is because of how many different influences in our language you have of like the European countries. So, for example, a word that we use for office, kantor. Kantor is from the Dutch word, which is I think is also kantor, and then doctor, the use of doctor and mantel, and the all of these different words, and sepatu, from zapatos, or from these other words. A lot of them have shaped our language, and also just fun fact, we also had Japan colonize us at some point, and that actually affected a lot of how we pronounce things. So a lot of our enunciations are based on how the Japanese use like their romanization, and that's why like our syllables are very like ka, ma, like it's very, you can hear like a little bit of the influences, and yeah, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things that always interested me personally about the Indonesian language is the first time I heard the word Pancasila. Because that's something that I was familiar with because from my background, like my Nepalese background, right? And then it's the exact same word that I found that a lot of Indonesians are using. So, but the context of how I understand the Pancasila and how most Indonesians understand is quite different. I understand it from like a slightly Buddhist perspective, but then it's sort of a statement of nationality in Indonesia. Could you tell us something about the Pancasila?
Anybody else wanna kind of Hachal? You guys wanna? Oh, if you hear me saying ka, it's because there's this like hierarchy, sort of not like seniority. So since I'm younger, I call them to it. So if you hear me like slip up saying that,
yeah, I mean, it's okay. It's okay.
Actually, Pancasila is the official foundational philosophy theory of Indonesia. So it comes from old Japanese words, originally derived from what is it? Parika, which means five, and sila, which means principles. So actually, this is the principles of Indonesia. There are five. There are five of it, and the first one is just like it's talk about the Indonesian patriotism, and then they also talk about the justice. They also talk about the democracy and social welfare, and the last one, the fifth one, they talk about the religions, the major religions in Indonesia. If you see the Pancasila logo is like a bird, right? It's actually
Garuda.
It's Garuda Pancasila, and there's also like the details of the logo, right?
The symbolism behind if you've ever seen like the Garuda that are on a lot of like Indonesian embassies like plaques, or you've seen it around, it has its meaning behind it. And
so just so our viewers understand, the Garuda is eagle, right? It's the eagle, I think.
Yeah, it's
okay, nice.
Mythical golden eagle. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think this makes a good enough transition for us to move on to the other side of our talk. So like you said previously, the old time, you had these ancient, Hindu Buddhist kingdoms, and everybody I think is familiar with the, Borobudur complex. But a lot of people don't seem to be familiar with like the other counterpart, that is the Prambanan complex. So could you just give us like an introduction to what the Prambanan temple complex is, and we can get started, I think.
All right, Kanif, I think was going to be starting us off.
About Prambanan, right?
Yeah.
So Prambanan
Yep.
Temple or Roro Jonggrang Temple is the biggest and the grandest Hindu temple complex in Indonesia. This temple is located in Kranggan, in Yogyakarta. So this temple was first built by Rakai Pikatan, who was the ruler of the Sam dynasty and the kings of the Sanjaya dynasty in the 9th century. This temple is dedicated to Trimurti. So it is three main Hindu deities, namely Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva.
Yep.
And
All right. So you have the Trimurti. So are these like Trimurti sort of like are they like separate temples, or are they in like one temple as like one, or is what's going on with the Trimurti there?
Well,
So,
the the place itself is actually dedicated to many. So the Prambanan is from Para, which is like it means many, and then Brahmana is the Hindu saint. So it's not specified like specifically for. I think the three main ones are the they I think they have the biggest ones if I'm not mistaken, but the whole place of the complex is dedicated for, and the whole place is called Prambanan, and I think like they're all just part of this one complex together. So I guess they are separated, but
but they're still
yeah,
considered like one singular entity.
mm,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
So could you
That's
give
how I put it.
us like an idea about like how many temples? Because I've heard that there's a lot within the Pramana, like shrines, even like tiny ones and big ones. So what's the layout of these large number of temples like? So
Let's see. Okay, for the new numerals, let me just a second. There's 240. Sorry, I was like looking through my notes again. 240 big ones, big temples, and then there's smaller ones inside the complex. So there's three ones that are dedicated to Trimurti for the Siwa, Wisnu, and Brahmana, and the rest. Kachelo, you wanna continue?
So there's actually a few temples. Second one is the Candi Wahana. The third one is Candi Apit. The fourth one is Candi Kelir. The fifth one is Candi Patok. And the sixth one, it consists the largest amount, is Candi Perwara. But as of right now, there's only around 18 chandis, around 18
Temples, yeah.
temples. Yes.
So,
yeah, okay. So a lot of shrines, temples in that area. So I've heard that there's some like mythical story that goes along with the creation of these temple complex, like besides the actual historical one. I think I saw it in one of the PPIUM's acts. It was, I think, about the creation of this temple. So could you give us the mythical side of how the temple story goes?
okay, Khan, if you want to start us off.
so once upon a time, in ancient times, there were two major kingdoms, namely the kingdom of Prambanan and kingdom of Pengging. The Prambanan kingdom, led by King Prabu Baka, was a famous, peaceful, and comfortable kingdom. King Prabu Baka had a beautiful daughter named Rara Jonggrang, which I mentioned before, while the kingdom of Pengging was led by a king who was arrogant, stubborn, and selfish. And And he had a powerful, magical, and mystical son named Bandung Bondowoso. So if you came to ID Fest 2017, you know him. And then once the king of Pengging attacked the kingdom of Prambanan in order to expand his territory, then uh, Bandung Bondowoso was with the soldiers and genies to destroy the Prambanan kingdom.
Mm-hmm. So they kind of like between the good guys and bad guys, and yeah, Rara Jongrang was the daughter of the good guy, and then Bondowoso was the prince of the bad kingdom, and then when they attacked over, yeah, then this is like a story of when they attacked over. Chalo?
So during the war, it turned out that the soldiers from the Prambanan kingdom were unable to deal with the royal army, and the king Prabhupada was killed at the hands of Bandung Bondowoso. And finally, the Prambanan kingdom was taken by the Pengging kingdom. But not long in power, Bandung Bondowoso met with Rara Jonggrang, the beautiful woman. Thanks to Rara Jonggrang's beauty, Bandung Bondowoso immediately fell in love and wanted to marry her. However, Rara Jonggrang was reluctant to accept it, considering that Bandung Bondowoso had destroyed the kingdom and killed her father. But Rara Jonggrang was also afraid to explicitly reject him.
So because she was afraid, so she kind of made this requirement, which is for Bandung Bondowoso to build 1,000 temples within one night before the dawn rise. So it seemed like a very impossible task to do, but if Bandung Bondowoso failed, then the requirement was that he couldn't marry her. So of course he tried to achieve the defeat by helping with the help of genies. So take note, this whole story is a folklore. So uh, they they believe that with the help of the genies, Bandung Bondowoso accepted the requirements and in a short time was able to build those 1,000 temples, and that's all composed by 1,000 pieces. But unfortunately, at the end, Roro Jonggrang was uh, like so when she saw like the temple was almost finished, she asked the ladies in waiting to make an artificial morning. So she cheated. Um, she was cheating this deal that they made, and because of that, Banu Manosa was really angry and then cursed Roro Jonggrang. And Roro Jonggrang then became a stone, and that was the last part of the temple that made the whole thing 1,000 pieces. So therefore, permanent temple. That's why it's also called Roro Jonggrang Temple. And yeah, this whole story was because um, during the time that the temple was found, the Javanese people that lived around it didn't know really where it came from, and so this story or folklore was passed down between generations of saying like, oh, okay, I think this is what happened. This is what happened. When reality is like a temple built by a certain kingdom, and they moved their capital to another city and they left the ruins there, and for 1,000 of years it like deteriorated, and then the Japanese people that saw like the remains thought, okay, I think this is what happened, there was like a genie here, blah, 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 and they passed down this folklore, and that's how it became known as the Prambanan or Doro Jongrang Temple.
So, a king who, likes this beautiful woman, basically the woman has requirements, right? So the princess, I think, has requirements that need to be fulfilled. And one of the requirement is to build 1,000 temples, right?
Yeah.
And she cheats the deal and then turns into a stone. Pretty interesting story. For me, honestly, I really like the genie's part because, I think
Yeah.
that's like the how he used these genies to build the temple is really interesting. Any other sort of maybe interesting things you have to say about the place? Have you guys personally been there and seen around? So anything that you could add.
Mm, have I been there? I think I have.
Been there once during the
Once? Oh.
Yeah, only been there once.
I've only been there once too. I think like
I have not.
oh really? Everybody, I think everybody in Indonesia like knows it's Indonesia is a very touristy place, so it's kind of like
Is
Yeah,
it?
I mean, we have a saying in our own language. It's the same thing here. So, even for me, I'm from Nepal, and everybody asks me if I've been to Everest, and I've never been anywhere near Everest. So, it's sort of something similar,
Yeah,
I think. So
but
yeah. So anything that, extra that you wanted to talk about Indonesia, anything that you think the audience must know, like if you are going to attend or talk about Indonesia, there's one thing you have to understand about Indonesia. So what would that thing be before we start closing up?
uh, that's one thing. Indonesia is not only comprised of Bali. Indonesia is
Yeah.
not just Bali. For I don't know, maybe like University of Malaya students maybe have already know like since there's so many of Indonesians here, but it, if you really want to travel, I mean, after pandemic and all, Indonesia has a lot of hidden gems and a lot of um, places uh, that are worth looking into, from like natural sites to like historical sites. And
Also from the food, right?
the food, the cuisine in every
Foods.
area is so different, and you have like from the spiciest like food in like Sumatra to like sweeter tasting food in
Si
Java.
Padang.
Yeah,
Si Padang.
and uh, it's if you ever want to go to Indonesia, just know that it's a, a lot hotter, I think, in some areas than the other, and that the different there's since there's so many ethnic backgrounds, there's actually a lot of um, different like cultural like the traditions around each area you're visiting might be different. So maybe take note of that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're interested in Indonesian food, I think kind of knows a lot in Malaysia. You could try out.
Yeah, there's a restaurant in Malaysia called Sederhana.
Mm.
They selling nasi padang, which is they selling rendang. You guys know rendang, right? Rendang, I think it's kind of
Yeah,
a
I mean, that's one of my favorite like dishes that
yeah.
I've had. Yeah, so yeah.
Oh, it's very delicious.
Very good. Yeah. If you ever get to go to Indonesia one day and try the local taste, it's even better. But there's a lot of, I think, SS2. Is it SS2? Is SS5? I forgot the area, but um,
SS15, is it?
SS5. Oh, yeah, it's SS15. Uh, what's the name of the place?
Say sapi.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, Sapi. And if like, there's a lot of Indonesians here in Malaysia, you guys can find a lot of Indonesian food and try it out to get something different. Yeah.
Okay, so one last question before we wrap like the entire thing up, right? Why would you think that whenever people think of Indonesia, it's always Bali? Like, what do you blame for this? Like, who do you point towards to?
Um,
I only you're the one who
uh,
state that.
okay, I've okay. This is just from my experience because every time I talk to people, sometimes like they don't know. They like people that haven't been to Indonesia or like around Southeast Asia. They'll just be like, "Oh, oh, are you from Indonesia? Oh, is that like near Bali?" And I'm like, "Bali is in Indonesia." Um, it's because of like I think media and West. It's a very popular tourist place, and like people that go to their honeymoon and stuff like that always look for like tropical area. And I think since Bali is the most um, I don't know, very developed tourist area, I think it's the one that people have heard or like of people experience it more, and that's why they carry out those like stories. Oh yeah, I went to Bali the other day, and then they just think like Bali is its own like Maldives, like or Hawaii. Like some people don't know Hawaii is part of America, so it's sort of like those type of um, things. But
There's also a movie like Eat, Pray, Love. You know that? Eat, Pray,
Yes,
Love.
eat, pray, love. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. They also have a shooting in Bali, right?
Yeah. Maybe
Yeah,
that's why. Maybe
that's
that's
why.
the,
That's
the
why. I
yeah. There's a
think if
lot
you
of
watch that, you can get the main reason why I only state that.
yeah. It's a pretty.
yeah.
Yeah, that might be true. So, last point that I want to end on is everybody, I think, who's keeping up with current news, knows that, Indonesia is shifting its capital. So, can you tell us, like, what is exactly happening with the shift in capital?
Mm, how is it? Funny. Let's see. Well, I think it's one of the Jakarta is super populated. So you know how
Yeah.
we mentioned how it's part of like the most populated in the world. Uh, it's actually got to a point where Jakarta might have the risk of um, drowning. Of like it's so heavy and populated that the small place of Jakarta, the capital, is just on its risk of being like slowly submerged by the seawater, and also because of that, it's hard to grow build infrastructure there because it's already so populated and um, everything is already so dense there, and so that's why they're trying to move it to Kalimantan or Borneo.
Yeah. But as I
Mhm.
know, it's not the capital. They're not
It's
moving the
not.
capital. They're just like moving, how to say, like Kuala Lumpur and
The
Putrajaya.
Yeah, the
Okay,
government.
yeah, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, I
So
mean, even that, it's a big engineering feat. So
yeah.
it's quite impressive, honestly. So I think we're ending. We're nearing the end of our time. So I'd like to thank you, Hanif, Rosita and Marcelo for coming to our show and then talking, giving us this introduction to Indonesia and talking about like the Prambanan temple and all of the different ethnic groups and religion and the geography, especially of Indonesia. Thank you so much.
No
You're
problem. Thank you for
welcome.
inviting us.
Yeah. Don't forget to come to Indonesia, guys.
Catch ID Fest next year
Yeah.
if you guys want to know more. And because a lot of the folklore you heard before from Banan was a story for our ID Fest 2 years ago. So you guys can catch PPE or Indonesian Society's events in the future.
Yeah, please look up, and follow PPIUM on Instagram and all of their social media, and also follow Misa and its social media for all our updates. So thank you guys so much. And now I basically will be ending the meeting. So bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.